And an incredible effort by the Mets bullpen leads them to a series split against the Braves. They might have lost Griffin Canning, but it was still an inspiring effort to get a win over Atlanta.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, today there's a couple of different stories for this postcast as we break down what happened in the Mets' final game of their series against the Braves. The positive side of things, the Mets got a victory. The Phillies got swept by the Astros, so all of a sudden, the New York Mets are in sole possession of first place. How unbelievable is that? 48 hours ago, when the Mets were still reeling, having lost the first 2 games of this series, we would have been floored to imagine that in a couple days, they'd be right back atop this division, standing by themselves. So that is the positive thing. The downside of this game is what happened to Griffin Canning, and that is something that we'll probably be talking about for a couple of days on this show, and I'll certainly spend more time on in the next segment. Early on in this game, the crazy part about it is Griffin Canning was lights out, and it looked like we were heading towards a pitching duel between Grant Holmes and Griffin Canning as each of these guys set the side down in order in the first 2 innings. Third inning, Canning gives up a leadoff single, gets a fly out, and then a ground out. And it was a routine play by Francisco Lindor. The camera is just on Lindor and the throw to first base. And then all of a sudden, you get back to the middle of the field, and there is Griffin Canning lying on his back with his leg in the air, awkwardly holding it. And what we now know is it is being deemed, or it's been called, an ankle lower leg injury, but you don't want to speak anything into existence, but whatever has happened already happened. It did have all of the signs of what could have been an Achilles injury. And so that's an absolute devastating blow, not only for the Mets, but for Griffin Canning, who was in the midst of a career year. And again, he looks so good in this game. And sometimes that's just the irony of when a guy goes down, is it's when they're at their best. You know, Canning struck out 3 of the first 6 batters that he saw in this game, and was well on his way to getting through that 3rd inning with a tidy pitch count. It looked like he was going to pitch really deep into this game. So we'll talk about the injury and what it means for the Mets to close out this show. But what was incredible is the way the Mets responded. And Austin Warren deserves a lot of credit. This is the guy the Mets grabbed today because they needed an arm. So Jonathan Pintaro went down. Austin Warren came up. Thank God they made that roster move, because Warren was so critical to this team because they just didn't have a lot in that bullpen anyway. I mean, we were going through it on the show, I went through on the show for this morning, where the Mets really did not have many bullets in the chamber for their bullpen. But Austin Warren and Dedniel Nunez carried the Mets through the middle of that game, and that's why they win. Warren, he has to face Ronald Acuna Jr. That's the first guy you got to face. That's rough. You had a runner in scoring position, and he gets Acuna to pop up, so he gets through that 3rd inning. Then he goes through the heart of the Braves order in the 4th, gets a couple groundouts and a strikeout, gets through that. The Mets get on the board in the bottom of the 4th inning. Juan Soto draws a leadoff walk on 4 pitches. Pete Alonso, who had a great game, hits a very long single, a 363-foot single to be exact. And with Acuna's arm, he decided not to test it out trying to get to second base, but you had Soto go first to third, and he would score on a sac fly by Tyrone Taylor. So that's when the Mets got their first run. Warren goes back out there for the 5th inning, had a 1-2-3 frame, picked up another strikeout. So again, we cannot say it enough. Austin Warren, a quiet MVP of this game, 2 1/3 innings pitched on 32 pitches, allowed 1 hit, struck out 2, and kept the Mets in the game. They tack on another run in the bottom of the 5th inning, RBI single, Pete Alonso, drives in Francisco Lindor, who had singled earlier in the inning. Brendan Nimmo advanced him into scoring position with a base hit of his own, and then Pete cashes him in with a 2-out knock. 6th inning, Dedniel Nunez comes on, and this is the best that Nunez has looked since last season. There's no doubt about it. He looked like Dedniel Nunez of last year, an unbelievable effort by him. And now all of a sudden it's so crazy, but he shoots so far up this bullpen when it comes to arms you trust, just because he has this ability when he locks it in and he finds the command of his pitches. He's got such great stuff. And we saw him go out there in the 6th inning, sets the side down in order. 7th inning, the bottom of the 6th, and the Mets come up empty. 7th inning, Nunez strikes out the side. And it was let me get the actual names of the guys he struck out. It was an impressive inning. Let's get to it. The 7th inning here. Yeah, it was Ozuna, Riley, and Murphy. I mean, that's 3 veteran, really good hitters. And Nunez just attacking the zone, strikes out Ozuna on 3 pitches. Fastball at 97, a couple of sliders, goes after Austin Riley. That was a little bit of a longer at bat. Riley fouled off a couple of pitches, but just a bunch of sliders, eventually able to get him to chase one, gets the strikeout. And then Sean Murphy, another little bit of a longer at bat, but fastball blows it by him up in the zone, 96 miles per hour. I don't think he got into a 3-ball count. I mean, it was just a completely different Dedniel Nunez. He struck out the final batter of that 6th inning too. So 4 consecutive strikeouts. Nunez, absolutely heroic effort, really, because this team needed every single one of those outs. The Mets rally again in the bottom of the 7th inning. Juan Soto, a 2-out single. Pete Alonso, again, huge game, has a double. That puts 2 runners in scoring position for Jeff McNeil, who continues to play really good baseball. McNeil able to get a nice flare hit up the middle that drives in both runs, and the Mets take a commanding 4-0 lead. Ryan Stanek, a 1-2-3 8th inning. Not Dedniel, Nunez. I got Nunez on the mind. Edwin Diaz comes on for the 9th. Even with the 4-run lead, the Mets just honestly needed to use Edwin because he was one of the fresher arms in the bullpen. He only threw 4 pitches the night before. He comes out for the 9th inning to make sure the Mets win that game, and he does exactly that, shuts the door. Did give up a hit, but regardless, you look at what this Mets bullpen did. 6 1/3 innings pitched. They allowed just 2 hits. They struck out 7. They did not allow a run, and here's the even bigger one. They did not walk a batter, and the entire game, the Mets did not offer a single free pass to the Braves. That's huge because you're not beating yourself. And it was just one of those games, whether it was just because the bullpen guys knew, like, there's not a lot coming behind me, so I just got to throw strikes. Sometimes maybe that's what it takes to find a better approach, and it was a joy to watch these guys inning after inning just set the Braves down. And that's a massive win for this team. Yes, it has been a brutal stretch over the last couple of weeks. You go from Senga going down, Tyler McGill goes down. You have the series against the Rays, you get swept. You go into Atlanta, you get swept. You have a chance to beat the Phillies. You end up losing that series, and then you lose the first 2 again against the Braves. You lose 5 in a row against Atlanta to start your season. And all of a sudden, it feels like first place is slipping away, and maybe the Mets are going to go into a huge funk. Well, here they are. Big game. They lose their starting pitcher. Another blow to this rotation. 3 of the guys that have been in the rotation all year going down in a span of a couple of weeks. I mean, that is tough to come back from. And this bullpen just steps up, and the lineup, just a team effort. There was no home run. It was working together. It was passing the baton. It was getting the big hits. 2 for 8 with runners in scoring position, funny enough, but the Mets able to do just enough, and they clearly had the better offensive game. 3 walks, 9 hits compared to the Braves, who had 3 hits the whole game. I mean, and no walks. So a really well-pitched game by the New York Mets. We'll talk about the Canning injury in a second here. It's definitely a shame, but that game was one of those victories where a team just finds a way, and I think it bonds everybody in that room closer together. Now they hit the road, and I think that's a good thing. It's not a long road trip. It's a 3-game road trip in Pittsburgh, a bad baseball team. Hopefully you can carry this and carry that us against the world mentality. Not that anybody forced any of these pitchers to get hurt, but just getting really kind of locked into, hey, this is the 2025 New York Mets. This is an identity. This is a resilient bunch. They just went through a really tough stretch, and here they are already on the other side of it, winning a couple games against the Braves to show that the Braves don't have to have your number for the rest of the season. The Mets can still go out and win this season series. They can end up beating up the Braves in the last 2 series this season and getting all the revenge they need to out of this. But you now are able to wake up in Pittsburgh and you're in first place because the Phillies got swept by the Astros and the up and downs of the season. Well, here you are on an upswing and the Mets are right back there. And I don't know how they're going to fill that spot in the rotation. We'll talk about it more in a second here, but this was a resilient win, and that's a welcome surprise for a team that hasn't been able to get the job done, to get over the hump in some of these games the last couple of weeks. But that's just sometimes the baseball season. And I think today you saw what the Mets are made of. A really impressive win. I want to talk about Canning, though, a little bit more in just a minute here, though. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that's made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is a reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you're going to find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll talk to a real person every time. If you're a trade pro looking for that extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your order. That's supplyhouse.com. If you're watching on YouTube today for the live stream, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. So Griffin Canning goes down. We'll find out the extent of that injury in a couple of days. I don't know if this is something that one MRI is going to tell us, like our let us know tomorrow. Very well could be the case. It could be worst case scenario here, and that would be an Achilles injury. I hate to even be talking about it, but it's hard to ignore when a guy goes down like that way. Then all of a sudden we're focusing in on the video and we're looking at the calf and was there movement in the calf? We won't know until tomorrow. Whatever it is, if it's a really bad ankle injury or if it is worst case scenario, either way, Griffin Canning is not going to be in this rotation for the next couple turns and probably a lengthy absence. So now you look at this rotation and it's pretty crazy how much things have been turning over. Now, all of a sudden, you're looking at Frankie Montas as such a huge addition back into this rotation, especially with how he pitched this week. You got him. You got David Peterson, who's going to go tomorrow, and he's going to be a huge benefit to have on the mound if he can eat up some innings against a bad Pirates lineup. It would be great if David Peterson can get you through 7 tomorrow because this bullpen certainly could use a breather, although they were able to stay away from Jose Budo and Huascar Braziban. So you do have a couple guys that can give you some length tomorrow, and I'm sure we could see an Austin Warren go down potentially. I mean, he pitched so well, I'd almost want to keep him, but you know how these things go. The Mets also have the roster spot that, of Canning where they can send him down, and that will free up some flexibility because the reason why Austin Warren came up today, he was the only pitcher on the 40-man roster that was eligible to join the team because everybody else has come up for a day and been optioned. And when they get optioned down, there's a 15-day period that you have to remain on your assignment in AAA before you can come back up unless there's an injury. So the fact that Canning got hurt means the Mets can grab one arm tomorrow and give their bullpen a 9th arm for the weekend, which is nice. We'll get through the weekend. They have an off day on Monday. And then you start to do the math on this one. David Peterson, because he's pitching on Friday and there's the off day on Monday, you got, Peterson, and then you got, who's next? Is it Monta? No, Blackburn. Theoretically, because of the off day, the Mets can keep their rotation on 4 days rest, and they can use that off day on Monday to sort of punt a decision for a couple of days. So they can essentially roll with Clay Holmes on Tuesday and then back around to Peterson, right? Because you'd have Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Yeah, so that's what they can do. They can go with Clay Holmes and then Peterson, Blackburn, Montas, and that'll get you through the Brewers series next week. And then when the Yankees come to town, that's when you'd have to find somebody to plug into that rotation in front of Clay Holmes. So you're looking at maybe next Friday where the Mets have to figure something out. So that's the one good side of this. Because of the off day, the Mets could play around with their bullpen with an extra arm for the next couple of series, and then eventually they'll have to make a move. On tomorrow's show, I'll probably go through the prospect side of this thing a little bit more. Does Blade Tidwell get a start or two? Do the Mets go with Nolan McLean, which would be obviously the most exciting option because he's the top pitching prospect in this system? We'll have to wait and see. But where this is eventually going to go is they'll get Sean Manaea back, and that'll fill out their rotation. It's pretty wild because you go into spring training and you have 9 viable starting pitchers, and you think, okay, well, I mean, how are you going to manage this? The guy's going to have to be in the bullpen, and it's just, this shows you why you build that much depth, because something always happens. And here's Paul Blackburn now. His spot in the rotation is safe for a little bit. I mean, Manaea comes back. The only way that I could see Blackburn losing his rotation spot before Kodai Senga comes back is if they do go to a Nolan McLean and he just looks awesome. If they go to him for a spot start and he looks really, really good, then maybe. Sean Manaea is supposed to make a rehab start next week. Everything has been going pretty well after he got that cortisone shot. So if Manaea can come back, you would see him the final week before the All-Star break when the Mets are playing. I can't remember which one's first. They're playing Baltimore and in Kansas City for their last road trip of the first half. So you likely get Manaea back that week, and then you could have a 5-man rotation of Peterson, Blackburn, Montas, Manaea, and Holmes. And then Senga, there is every chance that he might come back at some point in late July, if not early August. It does feel like the Mets are getting more and more to the point where they're going to need to try out a starting pitcher at the deadline just because the depth is starting to evaporate. The good news is they still have the depth to cover this for now. The devastating news is the fact, again, that Griffin Canning was having a career year. And, I mean, here he was pitching another gem, and he's been so good for the Mets. Now, I was talking to one of the Locked On Mets insiders today that, which is our texting service, who's not that thrilled with David Stearns. And, I was just kind of playing devil's advocate on why David Stearns is an incredible president of baseball operations. And he talked about the Mets didn't do enough in the offseason. Like, what they've done with Clay Holmes and Griffin Canning is remarkable. I mean, to pay $4.5 million to Griffin Canning, and even if this is it, right, this was all you got out of him, that's surplus value still. To get 16 starts at a 3.77 ERA and 76 and a third innings pitched. I mean, Griffin Canning, so good for this team. And it's just, you feel terrible for him because he's 29 years old and 1-year deal. Again, he didn't make a ton of money. You have a lot of starting pitchers that hit the market and they're making 15, 16, 17 million. If Griffin Canning stayed in this rotation all year and pitched to a 3.77 ERA and ate up 160 innings, I mean, he's going to get, even if it's not a multi-year deal, he's definitely getting north of $10 million next year. And now all of a sudden, if this injury really is the worst, he might be a guy that ends up getting the Mets rehab contract. And we've seen them do that with Brooks Raley and Drew Smith, a couple of guys. Maybe Canning's the next one to just kind of remain with the team so he can work his way through this injury. And maybe he can be a guy for the Mets. I mean, I don't want to just say it's over, but it's just, I shouldn't get too far ahead of myself. It's just when you see a guy who's walking off the field or not even, is getting helped so much to get off the field because they can't put any weight on it, it's hard not to go to that really bad place for Griffin Canning. So I feel terrible for him. He's been amazing this year. Hopefully this is a lot better than it looks, and maybe it is just like a super bad ankle injury or something like that, but like a really high ankle sprain. It could have been. We'll find out. I mean, it didn't look good, but the Mets luckily are going to be able to plug this spot soon with a guy that theoretically is going to be a little bit better than Manaea. The problem is you're then keeping a Blackburn in the rotation, right? And Blackburn has not pitched well, but he's got more opportunities now. He really hasn't had, was it 2 starts so far for Paul Blackburn? Maybe 3. So, giving him some more opportunities, he might surprise and impress. It's 3 starts so far for Blackburn. He's pitching to a 6.62. We'll see him over the weekend against a bad lineup with the Pirates, so maybe he can have a good start. But ultimately, when it comes to this game and what we saw, you just have to be proud of the effort the Mets put in. I mean, that the bullpen to show up that way between Austin Warren and Dedniel Nunez to eat up 4 1/3, so to get 13 outs in the middle of that game which is basically half the outs from those two guys, to save everybody else. If one of those guys gets knocked around, I literally do not know what the Mets would have done. They probably have to go to a guy in Budo who they don't like to go to on back-to-backs, or Braziban, who didn't look good a couple days ago. Garrett would have been pitching third time in 4 nights. So luckily they stay away from all 3 of those guys, which will help them carrying over into tomorrow. It really was just a very impressive performance by this bullpen to pick up an injured starting pitcher. And again, you credit the Mets lineup for getting 4 runs across. And now the New York Mets are back in first place in the National League East. So that is the biggest positive thing that we can take from this game, is the Mets are back on top. On tomorrow, I'll have another full edition of Locked On Mets waiting for you in the morning. We'll be talking about some more of the fallout of the Canning injury, but I'll probably be focusing, because it is a Friday, for a Friday Farm Report, and we'll kind of talk about what this could mean for a Blade Tidwell, who's on the 40-man roster, coming off a pretty good start in the big leagues, and Nolan McLean, the 2 guys that I think would be the favorites among prospects to potentially step in for a spot start, if not more than that. So we'll definitely be going through that. I'll definitely be previewing the Mets' upcoming series against the Pirates as well. Thank you all for tuning into this live stream, or for those of you who watch the playback, I appreciate all of you for tuning in. If you are watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets and become part of our texting service. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, check out Locked On Sports Today, which is streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today will keep you plugged in on everything going on in the world of sports. The NBA draft just happened, so there's a lot of basketball news going on. If you want to check out all of that great coverage, again, the Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.